UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena. Are they extraterrestrial, interdimensional, time travelers in origin, or are they simply a result of top-secret military black projects, false flag alien invasion psyop, drones, or other human-made aircraft? Join UFO historian Don Ecker, MUFON State Director for New York Chris DePerno, retired veteran pilot Commander Cobra, and well-esteemed host and researcher Martin Willis as they discuss the latest news and topics regarding UAPs with a no-holds-barred approach on UAP Crossfire.
Hello and welcome to our show tonight. We have a great guest. Bob Spearing is going to be on talking about all the different shapes of UFOs that are reported. We are dawnless tonight, and but I do want to introduce our co-hosts tonight. We have Chris DePerno and Cobra. Welcome both of you. Chris, how's everything going?
Good. I if I could, Martin, just real quick, I'd like this just to say goodbye and a tribute to a fallen hero from the police department that I retired from. His name is Michael Jensen. Michael Jensen was brutally ambushed and killed as he was investigating something at a house with another lieutenant. They were both ambushed and heinously murdered there on the spot. Jeez. Michael was laid to rest Saturday, and he left 3 children and a wife, homeless. Well, not homeless, but I mean without a father. They're fatherless now, and we pray for them every day. And they absolutely had a funeral to honor him, and you could see that he was very well liked by the number of people who came to this funeral. And I just want to say this before I end it. 100% of the proceeds go to these T-shirts that we're selling at usaracing.com. usaracing.com. Back the blue. All the proceeds go to the Husak family, Lieutenant Husak, and Michael Jensen's family that are now fatherless. Both families there. That's the back of the shirt. And I thank you both for at least giving me this time to get that out there, because right now they need a lot of help, and there are our prayers.
Amen to that.
Yeah, very sorry to hear that. Commander, how are you doing?
Very good, sirs. Great to see you both. Getting ready to hit the road. But off air, Martin, you made mention of a great friend of ours, mutual friend of ours that passed.
Yes, this is a personal friend and a friend of many people out there, Paul Eno. He passed away, I believe, a few weeks ago it was. And I was talking to him right when he first started getting ill. Anyway, he will be missed. I got to spend some good time with him. He not rented. I let him use my guest house for almost a week so he could do some writing. And we really had some wonderful talks. He was a great man. His son, Ben, and him have done hundreds and hundreds of radio shows on UFOs and ghosts and you name it. He's had some quite amazing experiences himself, and he will be very missed. Paul Eno.
Fellow coasting.
I will tell you, Martin, I was on his radio show. He was one hell of an investigator when it came to UFOs. He was a great guy, and he was always polite to anybody that you tried to talk to.
An absolute gentleman. A lot of people don't know he started out in a seminary.
Right.
As a seminarian, he spent quite a bit of time assisting on exorcisms. I think the numbers that he was involved in are staggering. I spoke to a very prolific minister that worked in the world of exorcism and was greatly impressed by Paul's work. As I said in the background, fellow coastie, he spent some time in the Coast Guard. Just a tremendous man. And aside from being an outstanding husband and a wonderful father, friend to almost everybody that he met, he probably personified and helped me really come to the conclusion of how everything is interconnected.
Oh yeah,
That everything is.
that was his thing. Yeah.
He drew from experiences where there was UFO, UAP, extraterrestrial activity, paranormal overlaps, areas. It was just amazing to talk with, and an incredible person for getting the story out to people. Very few people do terrestrial radio as well as he did. He did it for ages, and then he also seamlessly was working online. Wonderful guest for me. Hosted me a number of times. Heartbreaking that he passed.
Well, if it's all right with you two gentlemen, I'd like to dedicate this show to him.
Absolutely.
I think that'd be wonderful.
All right. So we hereby dedicate this show to him. Is that how that works? I'm not sure, but anyway.
That's exactly how it works.
Yeah. So let's bring our guest in. Bob Spearing, I met at the Pine Bush UFO conference in New York for the first time. He and I had been in touch a number of years ago, and he's a great guy and a wonderful guest, and I was really glad that he was available. And also, I'm going to be out at the MUFON Symposium in Dallas this July, and he is going to do his great talk out there as well on the UFO shapes and much more. And here he is, Bob Spearing.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome.
Welcome, Bob.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. May I just say one other thing about Paul Eno? Paul Eno was a member of MUFON's Experiencer Resource Team. Okay. And if you go to MUFON.com and look at our news articles, we have a nice obituary up for Paul on the front page of MUFON.com.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. So, Bob, I don't, if it's all right with you guys, I'd like to ask Bob, what started you down this road to begin with? Because I know we had that conversation when you were on my show, but I'm sorry, I just forgot exactly how your interest started.
Oh, it started over 60 years ago. In November of 1965, we had the great northeastern blackout on the east coast of the United States. I was 6 years old, and I remember the next day, my uncle came over the house all excited, saying that they thought it was UFOs that took out the Niagara Falls power plant. And there ended up being several reports that night of orange glowing objects over the Clay Power Station seconds before the lights went out from Quebec down to Virginia. So right after that, I started buying those Gold Key UFO comics in the 1960s. In 71, I was in 5th grade, and Chariots of the Gods came out. And my uncle, who was a real UFO buff, bought me Chariots of the Gods. In the 80s, I was into Saga magazine, Saga UFO magazine. And in 1986, I had my first UFO experience. I was camping at a very remote lake in New Jersey, and it was raining. I was sitting on an overturned canoe, looking out at this lake under heavy cloud cover. And I saw this pink star-looking object over the lake. And I watched it for a while, and all of a sudden, it just dropped, stopped, made a semicircle, stopped again, and then shot off and left like a pink streak across the sky. So to this day, I don't know if it was like ball lightning or if it was some sort of true orb, but that's what got me interested. And when I found out in 2013 that a guy actually wrote a book on orange orbs, that's what prompted me to join MUFON. I only had 2 other experiences. Around 2017, I was on a train heading to Newark, New Jersey, across the New Jersey Meadowlands. Beautiful blue sky, daytime, and I looked out the window with the train, and the train was being paced by a silver sphere, maybe 1,000 feet out, 1,000 feet up. And as soon as we hit the Newark skyline, it took off and went over the buildings of the Newark skyline. I said, that was close enough for me to see that wasn't an airplane, that was a sphere. The weirdest thing that ever happened to me was I was coming back from Quebec City, and I was going through the Adirondacks near Lake Placid, and it's pretty empty up there. We call it the dead zone. And there was a clearing in the woods, and there was a sheer cliff off to my right. And I'm telling you, I'm the only car on the road. And in this clearing on this cliff, I saw this object. It was a machine, had to be the size of 2 tractor trailers together, and it had like triangular wheels, and it was climbing up this sheer cliff. And I did a U-turn, came back to see what the heck it was, and it was gone. It wasn't in the sky. It was in the middle of no man's land, climbing up the side of a cliff, and it was some sort of huge tank-like object. That was the weirdest one for me. Yeah.
You think that might have been some type of military testing or something?
Quite possibly. But 2014's what got me interested in MUFON was the guy that wrote the Orb book. I was a
Terry Ray.
Terry Ray, The Complete Story of the Worldwide Invasion of Orange Orbs was the name of the book.
Yeah.
And I met him. So anyway, I just worked my way up through the ranks. I had a photo analysis background, film production major, a forensic investigator for a railroad, and I just progressed through the ranks to director of international investigations for MUFON.
Wow, that is pretty cool. Now, I have to say that I don't know of any other UFO sightings in the rain. I've, except for, maybe ball lightning, but I don't even know what that reacts with. But still, I've never heard of anyone talk about being in the rain or overcast, really, that type of situation. That's interesting. And it was pink. That is.
It was the size of a star. It was pink. It was under very heavy cloud cover. I'd say no more than 1,000 feet high, hovering over a lake till it began doing bizarre maneuvers and then just shot off.
You didn't hear any Pink Panther music, did you?
No, no Pink Panther.
No.
But it would stop on a dime, do another maneuver, stop on a dime, and then just shot off.
Amazing. Amazing stuff.
Bob, I'd like to ask you a question about your responsibilities with MUFON, because you're the director of international investigations, which is kind of interesting because you take care of everything outside of the United States, sightings and stuff. And you got, some territories that I was really surprised when you told me, like Iran and Japan and some of the other. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Interestingly enough, Iran gets for a sort of a closed country where you wouldn't expect to get many reports. Like China, we get 2 reports a year from China. That's about it. But Iran, we get a substantial amount of reports and a substantial amount of videos, and some of them are very interesting. And back in the I believe it was the 70s or the 80s, there were those Iranian Air Force sightings. There were other sightings in that same month. Interacting with fighter jets in other countries, so that Iranian situation wasn't a one-off. It seemed to be some sort of flap involving different countries' air forces. But Iran is the national director for Iran is Fred Kohler, and he's a very, very good investigator. And I'd say that the majority of UFO reports that come out of Iran, I'd say 60% of them seem to be unusual reports, and that's a pretty high percentage for any country.
Very interesting.
Culturally, the Iranians have a very interesting outlook on extraterrestrials and extraterrestrial vehicles. They are not, I'm not sure how it is under the present regime, how that's viewed, but from the time of, especially when you're talking about the Shah and those sightings in the 70s, very interesting. There's a interesting sideline to that the operation to bring not hostages, but folks that were left behind with the fall of the Shah from the government that were living with the Canadian embassy were brought out partially from a movie that was going to talk about extraterrestrials, and they convinced in this operation for the rescue that they wanted to use the architecture and some of the things that were in Tehran for the sets for the movies, and that was kind of how they set everything up, and that's how they brought out that number of those people. But it was a very fertile place for it. So, very interesting place.
Yeah,
So,
I think the hostages were released 44 years ago this week. Isn't that
correct.
true?
Wow. Amazing. So, Bob, I have a number of people have asked me over the years, why the different shapes? Is it a different model this year, or different planets, or wherever they're coming from? I'm not saying I know that they're extraterrestrial. That possibly, I don't know, wherever they're coming from. But before we get into the shapes, I guess I'd like to ask you, why do you suppose there are different shapes and different things being reported?
Well, let's say that they're coming from different parts of the universe, all right? Or let's say they're coming from different time periods, if they're temporal. Uh, then there could be, numerous, almost, an infinite amount of shapes, all right? But I do see that there are repeating shapes over and over again. And I mean, just the way we have, Fords and Mazdas and such, there may be, the intergalactic UFO, manufacturing company somewhere making all different models. What is very interesting is that if you go back to one of my favorite drawings is the Nuremberg 1561 drawing by Hans Glaser. There's cylinders fighting each other with orbs coming out of the cylinders. But if you look closely, and nobody ever notices this, there's two different types of cylinders. One type of cylinder seems to have windows, and one of them has no windows but opens flaps to let out the balls. In my estimation, both of these cylinders were probably manufactured on the same world, let's say, just the way a MiG fighter and an F-35 fighter might be built on Earth but look different. It made me think that there was some sort of civil war going on between two opposing parties in 1561.
Right. That is interesting. I'm trying to get the image up. It's just taken a while. But that is a fascinating. I think it's a.
He does that from time to time. He'll be back.
Does he? He glitches? Oh, okay.
So, Bob, you seem to have a rather interesting background. Do you get excited when you can't easily explain the sighting? I mean, when we were talking off air, you said, yeah, a lot of times people think it's a cylinder. And it turns out that it's not. It's just the way the photograph was taken through windows, the type of camera that they use, or whatever device that recorded it. But you must really get excited when you get down to the point where all the technical explanations are answered, and we don't know what we're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, we identify well over 85% of the stuff, like jellyfish. All right, there are these huge kites with tentacles that you have the Tic Tacs, which are usually airplanes seen against the blue sky. They look long and white, but it's actually just an airplane. From the angle of the density of the atmosphere, you can't see the wing, or you only see the wing shadow, like a little dark mark on the cylinder, but it can be identified. Same thing with like natural phenomena, like ball lightning, or like Chinese lanterns. So I enjoy figuring it out just as much as I enjoy being stumped.
Right.
But when I do get stumped, it's really fascinating when we
get absolutely. That's when the excitement really does start, because you've eliminated, most of the, and obviously this is a very storied process that you have developed and MUFON has developed, that when you can filter out the vast majority of pieces, the stuff that's there is intriguing. In fact, tying it into last week's show, Dr. McDonald was who we were talking about. That's where his scientific inquiry always took it. We should be looking at these ones that are not easily explained, especially by very qualified or trained observers that were describing them. Now, on this drawing and this catalog that you have, over the years, I remember there's been many, many studies where people would show up and show 3-ring binder with it, and they would ask the person, point to what you saw, or point to, almost like the mug book of what went through. This is a fairly established part of investigation, this categorizing different shapes. And you said earlier, if I heard you correctly, there seems to be some repeating that goes on, and like a cycle with the different types of shapes that are seen. Was I correct?
Yes. All right. So let me backtrack a little bit. MUFON doesn't investigate UFOs. We're fond of saying we investigate UFO reports because essentially every case, whatever happened is over by the time we get there or get a drawing or get a video or whatever. So the main ways that we can investigate is we look at the photographic or video evidence or drawings from people. We have a lab in Missouri that can analyze trace evidence when it's sent in. And that's always a thrill when we get something that we can't explain. And then there are patterns, okay? There's patterns in narratives of the witnesses, and there's patterns in the drawings, and there's also patterns in what people are filming. A lot of times with what people are filming, the pattern suggests that they're looking at a star scintillating in the sky that's out of focus late at night. So a lot of the nighttime videos are essentially like useless. But I have always honed in on the drawings because undoubtedly the human eye sees things more clearly than the camera is seeing when somebody is seeing something in the sky. And when we start to get really elaborate drawings that people send in and you start seeing them over and over again, you have to say that there's a good possibility that these people are seeing the same thing. Now, when we did the Project Aquarius gallery of drawings, 7,000 drawings that we pulled out of 135,000 cases, we found additional patterns, all right? Say we have 135,000 cases. From case 70,000 to 72,000 from 1984, there may be a large amount of discs seen in that short time period. And then that fades away, that pattern. And then maybe in the 90s or the 80s, like Hudson Valley, there's a preponderance of triangles that people are drawing. So we know that over the course of time, that people see things in waves. A certain type of shape comes along, then disappears, and then another type of shape comes along and then disappears, and so on and so on. Over 100 years, that pattern will show that, in 1897, there were airships that looked like dirigibles. And then in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, it was discs. And then from the 80s on, a lot of the shapes suggest that triangles are now in fashion. All right. And there's also, we'll see that over usually short amount of time, in one location, people will be seeing the same thing. During the great UFO wave of 1957, it was predominantly in Texas and the southern United States over a 1 week period. So there's temporal patterns and there's geographical patterns and there's shape patterns.
Jeez, that's something, huh?
Bob, I want to ask you a question. I've always been fascinated by this one particular thing, especially when I got into the ERT team. Is anybody working on the shapes of the craft and identifying the drivers of those crafts? Like a certain craft would go to Greys, a certain craft would go to Nordics, a certain craft would go to Reptilians. Has anybody tried to put that pattern together? I'd really like to know, if there's a certain species going, driving triangles, for instance, operating triangles.
Yeah, I'll tell you, in the 1990s, there was a series of triangle abductions, and the witnesses basically stated that they were hybrid crews of Greys and like tall blonde Nordics. All right, but I'm not a member of the ERT. Abductions aren't my thing, but there are certain patterns. I'm going to be talking about one in my Cases of Interest presentation at the MUFON Symposium. And one of them, there's a lot of bedroom encounters, okay? And a lot of times people get lifted off their bed, levitated out through a closed window to what seems to be like a roundish room with diffused lights, a medical table, and then they're experimented on by small Greys with a taller Grey in charge. 99% of the time, they can't describe what the outside of the craft looked like. All right. They're immediately in another room. So are they really on a craft at all, or have they interdimensionally gone someplace else? All right. So the bedroom encounters that I'm talking about in July concern hooded figures coming into people's bedrooms, predominantly females, and something is drilled or removed out of the left side of the skull behind the ear. And I have numerous cases of the same exact phenomenon. But the thing is, with the abduction experience, there's almost no cases where you actually see the outside of the spaceship. There are, but they're very few and far between.
Interesting.
Hey,
Wow.
Bob, can you quickly say when that MUFON symposium is going to be so we can plug it a couple times tonight?
Sure.
Sure.
It officially begins on Friday, July 12th, and runs till July 14th, Sunday. For field investigators who are coming early, people who already are MUFON field investigators, we have our field investigator training on Thursday, the 11th, but that's pretty much closed to MUFON field investigators only. The keynote speaker, I believe, is Michael Salas this year, and that's at our banquet Friday night. Saturday and Sunday are all day presentations, along with experiencer workshops and special get-togethers and things like that. So yeah, July 11th is for field investigators only. July 12th to the 14th at the Airport Marriott in Dallas, actually Irving, Texas, is for everybody, starting on Friday the 12th.
And that's not
Martin,
far
aren't you
from
going to be
Daily
speaking
Class.
there?
I'm not speaking. I'm the MC.
MC, okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that. So,
yeah, that'd be great.
And I do the cases of interest presentation at 2:30 on Saturday the 13th. So Martin will be introducing me for that presentation.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Good.
I just wanted to show you. This was the picture you were talking about earlier.
Correct.
It's not very clear, but you can see it, and that's always fascinated me.
Now, just look. I could talk about this all day long. If you go to the left, if you go to the left side of the screen, you see a cylinder at like a 45-degree angle with what looks like windows and orbs coming out. Now go up above it to the top left-hand corner. That's another cylinder, but it has no windows. But if you look at the top left, it actually has a hatch opening up. If you go to the top on the right side, there is a cylinder releasing a red orb from a hatch. So there's actually two different types of cylinders going on, releasing these balls. Now, is it a MiG against an F-35? Are they coming from the same place and they're warring each other? And if so, what are they doing here? The other thing that nobody ever really talks about is down in the right-hand corner, you see smoke. If you zero in on a good picture of this, you'll see that one of the cylinders has crashed, is on fire, and there seems to be a rescue mission of orbs around it. Yet the debunkers will tell you that this is all just a static weather phenomena of sundogs. But the most fascinating part of this drawing is the black spear. The black spear came along later in the day. The Zurich Library actually has 2 of 4 different versions of this woodcut by Hans Glaser. In another version of this, and you can find it very easily on the internet, there are cuts in the black spear. And it suggests to me that this is actually an aircraft, a 21st century modern jet with wings. The ratio of the front wings and the back wings is similar to an experimental craft, an American experimental craft from the 1950s.
Called the Stiletto.
Yeah, whatever this black spear was, it did not come from Alpha Centauri. It was manufactured on Earth and built and designed to fly in an atmosphere where it needs wings for lift, which is Earth. Okay. The question is, there you go. See the cuts? This object was coming in for a landing somewhere. Okay. It had its ailerons down to slow it down as it descended. What the heck was a 21st century jet, probably some sort of B-1 stealth bomber, doing in Nuremberg in 1561?
And Bob, I don't like to correct you at all. It would be their flaps that are down. The other would be for turning the aircraft to make it turn.
I apologize. Yes, you're correct.
And possibly slats. I would say flaps and slats. Looking at the configuration, how those two curves are, the curve that's in the front is curved the proper direction for a slat that's on the front of the wing. And the one on the back is curved in the proper direction for a flap. And what that does is it gives you more airfoil curvature, which allows you to fly at a slower speed while producing lift and drag at a lower power setting.
So you would agree that this seems similar to some sort of aircraft?
Well, when you started to talk about the Stiletto test aircraft, it looks almost like that. And it's very easy to understand how, if you filled in that picture and it was anything of a dark paint scheme or coloring to the aircraft, it's very easy to distort the wings and parts, but the proportions are very interesting.
There's a third version of this where underneath the wing on the bottom, there's a very small protrusion coming out the backside of the wing. And I looked up what that could be. I actually put it up on the MUFON Observer Network community, and some people came back and said it looks suspiciously like a little GPS antenna. So that adds even a little bit more interest in the third version of the Nuremberg woodcut.
Yeah, not seeing it, but yeah, that's all fascinating. I love the things that touch on history. That more people have seen things. I found a 1796, I think, a written in a diary about. It's called Perkins. I don't know if you've seen that, the Perkins memo, where they see these things in the sky and there's people on them and all that. But there was nothing we had that was flying around in this late, 18th century.
Bob, I'd like to ask you a question. Well, for full transparency, Bob and I talk at least probably twice a week, right, Bob?
Yeah, of course.
So I know this story already, but it's a fascinating story. You did a lot of work on orbs, and one of the stories you told me, and I just couldn't. It was fascinating about an orb that took down a whole village. I mean, it destroyed a village. Am I correct on that?
Yes. One of the things I've written about and will write about again are what are called violent orbs. All right. To me, I personally believe that the orb phenomena is several different phenomena. It's ball lightning. It is some sort of life form with a rudimentary intelligence or some sort of probe. And the third kind is most likely some sort of spherical craft wrapped in a plasma field in order to evade radar. So when we talk about violent orbs all through history, and I'm going back 3,500 years to ancient Egypt, there are cases of violent orbs. The earliest one I was ever able to find concerned Tutmos III, who was going against the Nubian army. And on the battlefield, they call it the miracle of the star. And this is literally written in stone. And when I say literally written in stone, it's called the Gebel Barkal Stela. All right. The story is written in a rock. That a white bright star came down, boom, annihilated the Nubian army without touching one person on Tutmos's army. That's a very, very discriminating meteorite. All right, just to take out one army on a battlefield. And it would seem unique, except that it happened again when the Romans were fighting the Pontians, which is modern day Turkey today. And it actually allowed the Romans to regroup and then move down into Palestine at that point, which changed history basically. In the 1970s, there was a very famous case that Jacques Vallée and J. Allen Hynek, they actually went to Salidare, Ethiopia, to investigate the story of this violent orb. And basically what this orb did was go down this city street. It was a red orb, broad daylight, and as it moved down the street, it churned up the ground beneath it, churned up the pavement, and caused the facades of the buildings in this village to fall into the street. The weirdest thing about it, a little girl got killed, by the way. Several people were injured. A little girl got killed. When the red glowing orb reached the end of the village, it turned around and came back down the same street, causing more damage, which suggests that it had intelligence and that it had intent. Both Vallée and Hynek classified it as a CE4.
Really something. Let's see. Do you? I guess I'd like to go into. You were talking about the shapes being, in a certain geographical area too, not just time-wise. Has something ever come out of like fashion, like for instance, all of a sudden, instead of discs in 1950s or whatever, in a region in, say, another country or whatever, they were seeing, cigar-shaped UFOs or something like that in one region.
That's drilling down pretty deep. It's the type of thing where I'd have to look into CMS and try to find, those types of patterns by using keyword searches. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head about something like that.
Yeah, that's all fascinating. So let's see. Do you want to start talking about some of the shapes of these things?
Okay, don't put them up yet. I want to do a little intro for the first one, which will be octagons. Okay. This last year, all right, what the media and our government, I believe, are trying to push as the big UFO news story are the congressional hearings. Okay. I think that last year the real story was what happened right after the Chinese balloon incident. Okay. On the 4th, they shot down the Chinese balloon off the coast of, I think it's North Carolina. And there's plenty of video of that. South Carolina.
I was there. I was under it.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I'm not joking either.
No, I believe you. There's plenty of video evidence to prove that. Also, there was also over the Black Sea, a Russian fighter jet basically took down an American drone. And we were very, very quick to release the footage of the downed American drone by the Russian fighter jet over the Black Sea. So you'd say, wow, that's very magnanimous of the United States government to show us those videos so quick. However, on February 10th, 11th, and 12th, 1 week after the Chinese balloon was shot down, the United States Air Force, once in conjunction with the Canadian Air Force, shot down 3 objects over North America, which is unheard of. They shot down an object near Barrow, Alaska on the tundra. They shot down an object, the Barrow, Alaska object may have interfered with the cockpit instrumentation. The Yukon object was shot down in dense mountainous forest. And then there was the most famous shoot down was over Lake Huron. And that was an octagon-shaped object with sort of strings hanging off it, the way the pilot described it.
And a very difficult shot, by the way, on that one over. They had a lot of difficulty actually getting the lock on that particular one.
They needed two Sidewinder missiles to take it down. All right. So there's a lot of interesting things about this story is that, think about this. They claimed after 1 week, they're calling a search off because it's too difficult to find these objects because of the terrain. Okay. So one of them was shot down on the tundra. So even if it snowed and covered the objects, we can find a dime in the Sahara Desert. All right. Never mind something under a foot of snow that's metallic with our equipment. All right. So to me, that's a lie that they just turned off the search after a week. Same thing with the Yukon object. Remember that last year a little private Cessna went down in the Amazon jungle with a bunch of children on it. The mother died, the pilot died. They found the kids 47 days later, but they found that plane in the middle of the Amazon jungle in a week. I flew over the Amazon jungle. There's nothing for hours, but they were able to find it. But they can't find a UFO on a tundra. They can't find a UFO in the Yukon forest. The one
they couldn't find anything in Lake Huron either, right?
That's where I'm going with this. The third thing was shot down near the upper Michigan Peninsula in Lake Huron in 147 feet of water. All right, I checked the depth. They couldn't find it after a week. However, when the Titan submersible imploded in the Atlantic near the Titanic, the search field was the size of Connecticut. All right, and they found that thing in 12,000 feet of water. But you can't find something in 147 feet of water in Lake Huron. All 3 of those things, they're lying to you. All right. So the weirdest thing is the shape, because when they mentioned octagon, I decided to go into the MUFON CMS, our case management system, 135,000 cases, and I started doing keyword searches for octagon and polygon and pentagon. and hexagon, and it was just amazing what I found. And the thing was is that in a lot of the cases, people actually drew what they were seeing. And in one particular case, 2 years before the Lake Huron object was shot down near the northern peninsula of Michigan, one of our MUFON CMS reports describes an octagon near the upper peninsula of the Michigan Peninsula, within 3 miles of where they think that the object went down. The final part is that even though they said they called off the searches, I don't think they did, because there were a flurry of newspaper articles right after that where suddenly they were finding all of these shipwrecks from 100 years ago in Lake Huron. That tells me they must have been looking for either UFO debris or Sidewinder missiles that went missing, all right, and accidentally found some 100-year-old shipwrecks. So if you want to put up some drawings of octagons.
Before you do that, Bob, wait a minute. I want to ask Commander Cobra a question because it fits right into your thing. CC, don't we have like some kind of GPS system or something if we shoot a missile and it hits the target? I mean, we must have some kind of system where we can track whatever we shot going down. Am I correct?
If there's a couple things you can do. First of all, the Sidewinder is an IR missile, so it's looking for a heat difference. That's why they had such difficulty. They fired 2 shots. I would be very surprised if the first missile survived intact. Generally, they can detonate or they'll have it destroy itself if it doesn't get to the target. And that had to be considered when the geometry of what they were doing for that shoot. You wouldn't want that to go into hit a vessel or get onto land and cause any casualties. That's one. No, we do not track by the missile or the part. Where you would get some of that information, Chris, is from the aircraft itself. We have a very accurate position based on GPS and probably an INS system as well. The 2 systems are common on most military airplanes. One has a known position and then it keeps it up, and then the GPS, of course, uses the satellites. So you know where the aircraft that fired the missile is. You have a radar image that gives a altitude and range from that known aircraft position where you're engaging it with the missile. In this case, you don't have to track that with a radar return. The plane may have maneuvered, but since these were not displaying classical kind of counter air-to-air type things, they probably stayed pointed at it, just like what Martin saw when the F-22 shot the Chinese balloon. The plane didn't veer away very quickly. You can see how that plane is basically heading in the same direction as the missile did that hit it. That's about probably about 8 seconds to 10 seconds after the missile hit and it's starting to drop. That's the F-22 passing underneath the bottom. So you don't have exact position. The best way you could have had all of that for a very precise position is if you had a third airplane that was either tracking everybody that was involved, something like an AWACS or something like that, or another fighter that was tracking everything and you had a good radar return. As I understood what would happen in the public sphere on that particular one, there was a lot of difficulty getting a solid return to last long enough, and then the heat lock was very difficult on it as well. So that brought a lot of theories to possibly what it was that we're shooting. I heard everything from hobbyist balloons to something that may not have had the same kind of that had stealthy type characteristics, that was shedding heat as well as image that didn't provide a good return for the heat source.
You know what I think is kind of amazing is that we had those 3 shoot downs in such a short time, one right after another. And, that was just so bizarre. And we haven't heard anything more about any other shooting.
I don't think there was ever any plans to talk about the Chinese one until the rancher in Montana with a really nice iPhone or a Samsung. I don't want to give, but until they start supporting the show, some really good Android phone with a really good camera. He took this picture on a clear day in Montana, and that balloon had actually lowered quite a bit. Cold, dense air. I've studied that balloon in the open files quite a bit, and there was a lot of interesting things that were going on there to take advantage of air current flows, ability to raise and lower its position. It had propulsion units to help it get into the areas that they wanted, ways that it could stay in a spot. There was no intention for that. The other ones that went down, as Bob said, highly suspect that we decided not to look. I have spent a considerable amount of time in the Barrow, all across the North Slope to Dead Horse, Alaska, flying in the dead of winter up there with IR systems and SAR systems. You can find things if you're looking for it, especially when you have stable cold, like there was at the time of year that they were looking at that. If you have stable cold and it's at night, you're going to get a certain change with something that's metallic or something that has a different consistency than the ice and snowpack that it's sitting on. There's a lot of activity that goes on up there. There's a lot of practice with the military building expeditionary airfields on the ice and snowpack up there. It's all part of what we do for the defense of Alaska. It's a key territory, and that part controls a very important pipeline. So that's nothing new. They're weak excuses, and I like the shapes, and like Bob's CMS study, you could run in and go back and look at stupid explanations that the government has provided, and that would have an interesting CMS printout as well that almost falls in the same kind of cycles that go on with this.
Now, can I ask you a question, Commander? When a military jet is engaged in an actual encounter, don't they have belly cameras that record the entire thing?
Generally not a belly camera, Bob, as much as what happens is there is a heads-up display referred to as the HUD. And when you see things that are shown on TV, when they show an engagement, there is a recording device in the cockpit that will grab this screen. And that screen usually is like a plate of glass that projects up onto it a lot of the imagery that the pilot wants. That's so the pilot can be looking out over the top of the instrument panel of the airplane, looking through this HUD, and can still see out onto the sky what they're engaging. Below that are the multifunction displays on most modern fighter type aircraft, which are basically the same kinds of screens that you have on your smartphone or Android phone or like a tablet, and they can move those imageries around. Some aircraft do carry advanced reconnaissance pods or a long-range camera, and there's a couple things. IRST is another one that is used that would allow, almost looks like a rifle scope that they can look and they can get a specific kind of return, either based on heat or some other aspect. In the particular case of that, you don't normally have a camera. But the gun camera film that you always hear referred to from like World War II and Korea has been replaced by now a digital imagery because all that's recorded. So some of it was shown when they fire that, but you're not going to see very much, especially when you take, as you know, Bob, from video production. If you take that presented data, not the raw data, not that you could go through and analyze almost frame by frame the digital imagery that was recorded, when you show it in a compressed file format, you're not going to get the detail, and that's done on purpose. We're not going to allow that out, and they would never put something that would show how good the picture is to the public because you don't want to give the enemy any idea how strong or how capable those cameras are. That recording.
Commander, don't we have satellites though that could watch this in real time?
Yes and no. Not a common place for satellites to be positioned. And again, you're talking very close to the surface of the Earth. You're talking about very small objects. The fighter is very, very small. What it fired at seems to be very, very small. So satellites do not blanket the surface of the Earth constantly. And generally, we try to put our satellites in places that we're really interested in looking and taking nothing away from the Klondike of the Alaska-Canadian border or the Great Lakes. There isn't much interest there, as much as they are, say, like the Middle East or Ukraine. Those areas probably get a lot more attention. Possibly some stuff over in PRC as well. We're probably interested in what they're doing.
You know, they never mentioned those 3 shoot downs once in the NASA hearings, in the whistleblower hearings, or in the Arrow hearings. I was very, very disappointed.
Well, that tells you a lot, though, because that's something you bring up, a very good point, Bob. No one asked. That's the first thing. No one asked about it. It didn't catch a lot of attention on it at all. It was the buzz for such a long period of time, but it played out very well. I mean, if you're trying to control or shape a message, we really let everyone run kind of crazy with it, right? And then we ran off to the next interesting, shiny thing, no pun intended, that came along. So I think we've proven that if you can TikTok it enough, you will get the public to move on to something else. You'll get them to be fascinated by something else that came up. And if you think about the daily bombardment of what next, what is happening now, it's not even daily. It seems almost to go in 5 to 6 hour cycles. There's a new thing to be fascinated about, and you can bury it pretty quick. I just find it absolutely intriguing that no one asked in all those get-togethers what's gone on, what happened, what was going on there. No one had anything to say about it. And one last thing I want to bring up, I'll have to look it up while we're on break. In the 60s, an F-106, a flight of 2, took off and engaged and followed an object in this same part of the Great Lakes. It's one of the first recorded UFO intercepts that went on. The pilot that did it, a good friend of mine, Ray, did the work and investigated this, and they were prepared to shoot this down. This is, height of the Cold War concern. This was a route that was very concerning because they felt there was a good chance that coming over the top of Canada could allow a deep to the continental the United States Canada attack. So this was what was an important route at that time. This is an interesting area, and Michigan gets a lot of activity all around that particular area.
There was also the Felix Moncla incident in 1950s. Felix Moncla was a fighter jet pilot. He was sent out to investigate a UFO over Lake Superior on radar. This is a radar case. His plane was seen merging with the UFO, and he and his plane were never found again over Lake Superior. The Felix Moncla incident.
Amazing. Those incidents like that, and then I'm trying to remember that. What was the one that crashed? And they think that it had to do with a UFO, but some people thought he just might have went too high. And
Mandel,
that's it. Yeah.
Mandel.
Yeah. Another amazing case, chasing UFOs. But they think he might have gone just up so high that he didn't have oxygen. I don't know what he had if he did not have an oxygen.
No, he had oxygen. What they theorized is that he could have depressurized, or he could have had a leak, or went higher than his oxygen system would support.
Mm-hmm. I see. Interesting.
Once again, wouldn't they have seen him on radar, though, Martin? Or is that too difficult back then?
No, it's not 100%. That this is. I mean, we lose airplanes on radar all the time. There can be anomalies in the atmosphere. There can be overloads. Where we're really sophisticated now is we have put gear on each aircraft that when the radar signal hits, it sends a radio signal back that gives you all the information. If it's an airline or if it's a military airplane, its number. It sometimes it'll even have the additional information telling you altitude, airspeed, where it's headed to, what its flight plan is. Most of our possible intergalactic, they're not playing on that. They're not following flight plans, and they're not carrying that gear. If they are, they're not using it.
Gotcha.
Well, all right. So I think what we want to do is we want to take a break, and we're going to come back and start talking about those shapes. I know we started to go there, but we get distracted. That's why we call it Crossfire, because we like to get distracted. Different opinions, which I think is great. All right, so we're ready to go on break. I'm with Chris DePerno, Cobra, and Bob Spearing, and we'll be back right after these messages. And we're back. Wow, look at Bob pop in. Hey, we're back. So yes, Bob, we're back here with Bob Sparing and Chris DePerno and Cobra, and we were talking shapes. We got all sidetracked on all different types of interesting things, and I think the whole shoot down thing was fascinating. And I did also wonder, and I mean, not having any experience in this, and not talking to you, Cobra, who you have a lot of knowledge about this stuff, but I was wondering why on earth they couldn't find any of those, those other ones. I mean, it just seemed really bizarre because, like you said, the way they can find almost anything in the Amazon jungle, I know what you mean. It's just unbelievable that they could find something there, I mean, compared to like a snow, I mean, unless it was in the middle of a snowstorm and snowing or something like that. But I don't think it was at the time.
I think they found the objects. That's what I think. They're just not telling.
I think they did as well.
Yep.
Oh, they would never hide anything from us. What do you think?
That's correct. Yeah, Martin, that's absolutely correct. And we can just move on to the next part of the show because you've completely calmed the waters here on this. So let me give you two possibilities. It's extraterrestrial or it's terrestrial. And one thing that's very, very embarrassing that's come out of this whole thing is that a lot of the components that were recovered on the said Chinese balloon and some of the drones that have been recovered on different battlefields are showing a large number of American-made, NATO allied countries components on there that have been cobbled together by our friends over in the PRC and put together in a very effective package and being used against us. That can be very dissettling at any time. Things are going to continue to amp up in that direction. We're headed to an election year, so everything is going to be magnified either direction. So I understand that it can be for national security. It can be for trying to calm the public. But a lot of times it's kind of embarrassing stuff as well, that we have all these laws that are supposed to be followed, export laws that have to be followed. And the next thing you find out that somebody's selling the stuff right out of the garage, and it's gone there. So it doesn't surprise me. Well, I think what really throws a lot of weight behind what Bob said is these did not get brought up. I can understand the Chinese balloon one, but none of this came up in the Capitol Hill hearings.
Right.
Nothing.
That's right. So let's get into the polygons, the different several shaped items.
So there's a bunch of things I can get into here. The earliest case we have is the second one from the left on the top. This was in England in the 1970s. Basically, a teenager was sitting on the top of a hill near a power pole, basically, where there would be high tension, electricity going through it. And he saw this hexagon-shaped object going back and forth at the base of the tower on its side, and it was definitely metallic. It seemed like it had burn marks around the perimeter of it, possibly by trying to interact with the high tension wires, but in the middle of it, it had a glowing orange type orb. This is the earliest case we found. What you'll notice in many of these cases, the first one on the top, you really can't see it, but the person was drawing this shape, and the majority of these shapes were about 60 feet in diameter. There are a light pattern on the bottom of the this one's an octagon in the upper left, of yellow lights blinking in different patterns. If you go to the third picture on the top, this one is the only one we have from overseas. That was a French one that had orange lights in blinking. There was a pentagon, I forget where this was because I don't have access to the CMS right now, where a pentagon was seen with orange and red lighting patterns on the bottom of it. The one on the top right is what the person saw over Lake Huron near the upper Michigan Peninsula 2 years before the shoot down in exactly the same place. The one in the middle on the left took place just outside Offutt Air Force Base, and what the person saw was quite unusual. They were watching planes go by, commercial jets, and they saw what looked like a blue orb come up fast behind the jet. And he's watching this with binoculars. And as the jet moved away, the blue object, which he says was at least as tall as the tail fins of the plane. So figure maybe 20, 30, 40 feet. And it followed the first plane. He said 10 minutes later, a second plane comes by, and all of a sudden, a blue orb comes up behind the tail of the second plane. And he watches them go off into the distance with this commercial jetliner being chased essentially by this big blue orb. 10 minutes later, the next airplane comes along, and he's watching another blue orb come up behind the plane. And before his eyes, he said it morphed from a blue ball into a hexagon with yellow lights blinking in patterns, like all of the other cases we saw in the top row. So this suggests that whatever these polygons are have the ability to morph from something nebulous into a solid technological machine. Okay, the next one, the black and white photo in the middle towards the right, was also a lighting pattern of orange and yellow lights on the bottom of the craft. And this one was in California, and I'll specifically go back to several of these in a minute. The one on the right side was also from California, and this is the size of the object that flew over the person's car. The little red rectangle is their car, and going by the fact it's an 8-lane highway, that's how we first established that these objects were in a 30 to 80 a foot in diameter range on a regular basis. But the one on the left bottom, I don't have access to the CMS, and I can't remember which case this was, but it had a white light on the bottom that would blink. And so what we have in a majority of these cases are octagons, hexagons, pentagons that seem to have orange, yellow, white lights that blink in some sort of ongoing pattern. And I believe that if we could decipher what those patterns of blinking lights are, it could give a good indication of what the objects were doing. The main point I want to bring out here is that in 8 of these cases, these objects were seen just outside military bases. The one in the center with the black background around it, that was seen over Special War Ops headquarters in California. When we go down to the third row, the sort of sepia-toned page shows 2 objects. The one on the bottom was semi-transparent. It would blink in and out as if it was crystalline and could barely be seen with the naked eye. But the object above it, which is actually a circle but has a large pattern of hexagon yellow lights on the bottom and a large glowing orange ball in the middle, like the 1970s near the power tower. This was seen a mile away from Fort Knox. The majority of these cases were seen near some of our most highly sensitive Air Force bases like Beaufort. The only thing over Lake Huron were 2 Coast Guard bases, so they seem to be of less significance to me. The thing that's interesting about the 2 objects here that were over Fort Knox is that it happened in August of 2023 at precisely 4:15 a.m. in the morning in Kentucky. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Fran Ridge's of NICAP, his MADAR system, which is a series of little cigarette pack sized machines you plug into your home modem if you want to be part of his UFO tracking system. And basically what these little MADAR units do is, A, they look for sudden changes in barometric pressure, and B, they look for significant sudden magnetic swings, and that will send them into alarm. At precisely 4:15 a.m., the MADAR unit closest to Fort Knox in somebody's house went into alarm, the same time as the MUFON witness reported this object coming down over his roof. So this is the first time we actually have a correlation between a MADAR unit and a MUFON report. What's significant about the MADAR unit going into an alarm is that the MADAR unit is designed to do one thing. It's designed to see if something may be coming into our atmosphere or leaving our atmosphere. And if it's within a certain mile range of the MADAR unit, that will trigger the MADAR unit. What's suggested here is that the MUFON witness saw something come down from outer space and hover over his house near a very sensitive military installation. The last picture, I just found out the other night going through the old drawings that I pulled out for the Project Aquarius library. And as soon as the CMS is back up, I want to add this one to my collection because it seems that this hexagon was gyrating. So the points I want you to get out of this is that A, they all had patterns of lights that seemed to be significant in certain colors. B, the majority of them were near military bases or sensitive locations. And C, they may have the ability to morph from something nebulous into something like a machine.
That's interesting. Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to ask Bob, because, after a while, I decided that those Tic Tacs are possibly ours. The Tic Tac sightings that happen. And I've come to believe, my belief is that they're ours. So I'm looking at some of these here, and I see shaking heads one way or another. Hey, I was a believer that they were not of this earth, but then after studying stuff, I kind of went and talking to Michael Schratt and some other people that the possibility is a good possibility they're ours. But anyways, getting back to Bob, could some of these diagrams that you just shown, could they have been drones? Because a lot of them kind of remind me somewhat of some drones. So not all of them, but some of them there, the way you're describing them and stuff, could they have been drones?
They'd be very big drones at 60 feet. The second one, the earliest report goes back to 1975, I believe it was, in England. So I doubt that was a drone. And the third point is, why would we shoot one down over Lake Huron if it's ours?
Well, it may not have been our drone, but it might have very well been a drone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's the question I had after all that. When you came to the morphing, I have a friend who I've talked about it before on the Antiques Roadshow, who had witnessed a box-shaped, craft came in when he was at Amherst College between the towers, and it had blinking lights on the corners. He said that's what he noticed at that time. Fighter jet came, the thing shot off toward the mountains, and then all of a sudden it burst into 5 lights, and the 5 lights were blinking in sequence. The jet was going after it, and then it shot off. I mean, that's such a weird story, and so I just wonder, have you ever heard anything similar to that?
Just last week, somebody posted something on Facebook where they said that they saw a craft that broke into 5 pieces and turned into 5 separate different things. That could be a drone, some sort of drone cluster breaking apart. But I just saw that last week that somebody saw a UFO break into.
So I want to jump in real quick. Chris, when you say drone, you may be indicating a man-made terrestrial kind of vehicle is what I'm picking up that you're saying.
Yeah.
Well, let me also throw one other part. If I was going to another world and I was trying to get information or I was trying to ascertain stuff, I would use drones from my primary vehicle, base, whatever, to go out and do activities. I'm always very curious in these reports when there's lights and the lights sound and look like positioning lights on an aircraft. I could never understand why extraterrestrials would take the time with advanced technology to observe the same kind of red light on the left side, green light on the right side of the airplane for air traffic control purposes.
They're trying to mimic us. That's all. It is.
Yeah, I just don't buy it. Sorry,
Yeah.
that one.
I know.
There,
I'm joking.
You'll convince me of that right after the UAP is the Tic Tac is a UAP that was extraterrestrial. I don't quite pick up that one. But autonomous vehicles and what we're starting to approach now as a as an openly discussed capability is very high. And look at the activity that we did on the moon and what we've currently done on Mars. So that makes sense that you might have that. One side question, Bob, when they describe these octagons, did they give the third dimension? Did they give the z-axis kind of shape of what they saw? Were they flat on the bottom when they went over the top, or did it seem to have it?
Most of these people saw them from underneath, so I would get the impression that the bottoms were flat, except in the case of the 1970s British one, which seemed to have like an equator, almost like Saturn. All right.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's. You want to move on to the stealth? Do you need to talk about that first?
Yeah, sure. Just quickly, I just wanted to give the next two. I just want to give examples of what MUFON believes are probably terrestrial craft, but there's going to be a twist with it. If you want to pull it up now.
Sure, you bet. Yeah.
Okay, so in the past 3 years, MUFON got these particular set of 5 drawings, and to me, they immediately stood out as looking like some sort of B-1 stealth bomber. What was interesting is that they described these objects as smaller than a B-1 bomber and that they were white. All right, and that they seemed to have windows in the front and a curvature on the wings. So they weren't sure if they were some sort of saucer-shaped craft or some sort of winged craft. So interestingly enough, in October, the United States released the first picture of the B-21 Raider. Raider, and that's a picture of it in the middle. This new generation of stealth fighter is smaller than a B-1, and also they're white, just like all of these witnesses were describing. So I believe that what these MUFON witnesses were seeing were test flights of B-21 Raiders. The problem is the inaugural flight of the Raider was in October of last year, and all of these cases are prior to October of last year. And the weirdest thing about them, and maybe Commander Cobra could enlighten me on this, in 3 of the cases, the witness said that the object was silent and hovering. So I don't know of any capability of a stealth bomber that has the ability to hover. What's your thoughts on that, Commander?
Well, I'm sending a picture to Martin and Chris right now to throw up for us to talk about in the show, because a couple of those pictures resemble something. So, no, there is nothing on the B-2 or the B-21 with it hover, but during the 80s and 90s, there was a triangle-shaped aircraft that had the same kind of front-on profile look that was never actually discussed, ever designated in the public sphere, and I never was able to find anything on the other side that showed or demonstrated a capability of vertical takeoff and landing or hover-type flight. And it was extremely silent, and it had interesting propulsion. There is definitely discussion on TR-3 Mantra, stuff like that. This happens to be Tacit Blue. It's affectionately referred to as the alien school bus. You can go up and actually touch this aircraft. It's at the Wright-Patterson Aviation, National Museum of Air Force Aviation. Oh, excuse me, National Museum of the Air Force at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. It's a little bit banged up from its glory days of flying because you can, as I say, you can pretty much walk right up to it. If you lean forward, you can touch it. They don't want to give away some of the capabilities. This was an incredibly important breakthrough aircraft in the stealth technology. Very interesting shape, that duckbill in the front. It demonstrated a lot of the mathematical principles that was attributed to a Russian mathematician that started the whole stealth capability by reflecting and not directing energy on this. I've often been curious what this aircraft beyond research did, if there was more than this one aircraft. And of course, the 117, the famed F-117 Nighthawk, caused an incredible amount of attention. And to actually get that to do the work and to try to divert some of the attention to it, it flew around with A-7 aircraft, which were traditional attack airplanes that were painted black, and they were seen quite a bit, but they would be in front and they would be behind the 117 because there was no way to really track the 117 when they were doing the initial testing to show how well its stealth worked. You're talking about aircraft that basically have a radar return the size of a small ball bearing. That's where we're at between shapes and the materials that they're putting on there to absorb and reflecting energy in a way that doesn't show up on radar. So you looked at that tacit blue. There's some other aircraft that were like that really matched that picture. And if you notice, when you get into that, when you see that capability, you're tending to look at something that's using lift as opposed to just pure thrusting technology. But when you get into the shapes that don't have the wing capability, now you're starting to talk about, are we getting into augmented? This is all aerodynamically tacit blue, but are we getting into areas that are using anti-gravity? Are we using augmentation between downward thrust as well as forward thrust? Very, very interesting stuff. And I know balloons are, we had a lot of talk. One of those really large triangular aircraft was rumored to be a combination of lighter than air technology or near neutral buoyant technology, as well as lifting shape to it. So the idea is that once you got it flown at a fairly slow speed at night, you could pretty much park it over where you wanted to go, very low radar return, and it was nearly silent. And it allowed you to do a lot of intelligence gathering on that. Interesting theory on all those things going on there.
Speaking of theory, what about the TR-3B that everybody always seems to bring up in these conversations?
I think that aircraft had a very interesting, it may still be flying. I have a number of friends that have from in and out of the service that have seen stuff, that participated in exercises. I have a feeling, though, that it may have been so dangerous or expensive to pull off what it did that it didn't allow it to be mass produced. You could only get what you wanted, this very advanced technology, but it couldn't practically be turned into a fighter or a bomber. So you compromised to get the offensive capability that you wanted on it. But I think these aircraft, I am convinced that we're flying something very stealthy that looks like a B-2, a B-21, but it's a transport airplane. It's not a bomber. It's designed to get in and put troops into a location or be able to pull people out of a location in a very stealthy manner. And as you know, endless obsession with the triangle-shaped airplane. If you want to get my fangs to drop, this is the subject to bring out. Especially from our military part. No doubt that the TR-3 flew. A lot of folks over the years have told me about experiences they've had around it. And I think some of those pictures back up those experiences. And I also think that there's a very interesting extraterrestrial explanation of discs and large triangle-shaped airplanes that fits. It fits into the aerodynamic scheme of it, that a disc and a flying triangle shape have a lot of common characteristics. that you would possibly use. So, for what it's worth, the TR3, no doubt in my mind that something of that nature was flying, and possibly its successor is.
Okay,
And what do you think about that, Bob? Are there reports that are reporting what appears to have been one of those?
Well, that's the next series of drawings that we'll bring up. I believe these are some sort of United States military that could be some sort of companion or prototype of a TR-3B or Aurora. So
Right.
I would like to get the commander's opinion on this group of pictures.
Your picture in the lower left and the picture just to the right of it I have seen. I have a very good friend. He will not discuss it on air. I asked him a number of times, who saw and almost drew a picture, and he happens to be a graphic artist by trade. So he drew a very, very detailed picture, almost identical to what you're showing here. The traits that you're showing on those bottom three pictures, actually all of them, with the exception of the one that looks like to have an area intake, and I have a very interesting take on that one in the upper right for you in a second, appear to have that advanced propulsion system that appears to be something more than just propulsion to generate the vertical capabilities. I think that there is a lot of room to say that there is both terrestrial as well as extraterrestrial kind of capabilities there. That upper right has a classic shape to now probably the most important reconnaissance platform that we're flying. The RQ birds that are out there right now. Again, I'm citing nothing classified here on that. This is open press, but that particular design and that shape is very stealthy. It has characteristics that allow it to exploit its stealth, plus has great cruise capabilities. That design looks classically to me to be an air-breathing vehicle. Intake on top so that you keep the radar return from the bottom not easily seen. And that is a very popular design. The markings on it look like standard airfoil kind of capabilities for control. Where you look at the other ones, you don't see those capabilities easily showing itself on there. So the maneuvering is done in a different way. Not the way I control aircraft that I fly, that it's done in a different way.
Do you think there could be some sort of anti-gravity technology? Just last week, they believe that they may be getting close to finding actual gravitons.
Yeah, so if anybody's telling you that you're getting close to something, that means at least a couple of Tuesdays back, we probably have been messing around with it. I think, though, the level of energy, the level of capability that has to be put into it to make it successfully operate is probably very expensive. Here's the other part, and I throw this up on the show often on a basis. These are very disruptive aircraft or vehicles that, if they exist or they exist in great numbers, are going to cause a really big shift. And we live in a world that if a shift like that comes up, it could mean economic turmoil because entire industries would be basically become the horse and buggy to a vehicle leap that is so great. Would that trigger a very aggressive act on countries that are unfriendly to each other, that we better attack now, or we better take very aggressive measures now because we are so far behind, we have no chance. But we have an ability to engage it now. I think that those are all kinds of behind closed doors expressions that countries have that they wrestle with. But there's no doubt in my mind what you're showing on those bottom pictures. And I have to dig up the picture, Bob, and I'll talk to you sometime off air on it. It is very close to a description that I saw that matches up with repeated. And then in the area where I live here in New England, between here and going over towards where you're at, very often this has come up. I think it may be an area technology.
Let me just mention, though, what about the square sides? How would something like that become airborne? There's no lift capabilities there.
Well, that's the point, though. You're not producing lift by moving pressure systems of air above and below the aircraft. What you're doing is that you are using the force of gravity and the force to repel it as the ability to lift it up. There may be propulsion where you're accelerating this, if you think of it like a puck on ice, that you're lifting up by putting an airflow underneath it, and now you add another force to make it go. And now the technology is at a point where they've talked about, and this is what I think attributes to a lot of reports when you see it, of possibly putting out a plasma field around the aircraft. So think about the amount of power that you have to generate. But when you separate that, you actually make a void in front of the aircraft, the vehicle. And that void is a vacuum, and it's devoid, and you're going to flow into it. And that's going to take away air friction. You're going to remove it because it's no longer there. That's past theory. I mean, that's been proven in labs and very limited with huge amounts of power.
Right. Mirabelle or something like that worked on that years ago.
Correct. And and when you think about people that have been underneath these vehicles, what they've experienced, the kind of nausea, the kind of things that look like radiation-type poisoning, loss of teeth, loss of vision, hearing, early onset of horrible physiological reactions of like being exposed to it. It makes sense when you think about that. Now, if you think about that, if you have that kind of power available, that means you could also probably be able to create an atmosphere inside or a containment inside the vehicle that would allow humans of our kind of build to survive extremes that we see demonstrated with these aircraft. So,
interesting
vehicles, I should say.
Can I ask another question? You said that these vehicles can open up a void in front of them. The MUFON also gets a lot of cases where people describe an object that seems to be going into a portal.
Right.
Could they be mistaking an object going into a portal with some sort of void being created that's visible ahead of these technological American planes?
Two things there, Bob. One is, a lot of descriptions I've read where people talk about the portal, it goes in the portal and then it disappears. So that tells me now we're doing that hyperspace stuff from Star Wars, and there's, that may be, folding positions and interdimensional travel. I don't discount that. The other one that you may hear a lot about is that if you create this, I would imagine that the optics around it, what you're physically, the physical change to the atmosphere, the molecules, so it's happening, gives it a different look and a different appearance, as well as you probably have seen countless reports where they talk about different colors that seem to like emanate when these vehicles are moving. Where they go, you'll have blues and purples, shades of red that go in there, which indicates something that you are altering to the atmosphere around you that's going to change the light spectrum, how light's going to be reflected, and then what's available light. Are you talking about darkness, where you have a different light spectrum that's available from celestial bodies, or when the sun's out? And then, so that doesn't surprise me. So I think there's two things going on there.
Okay, so if we go all the way back to Nuremberg, before that show in the sky happened, you see the sun in the narrative in the newspaper that you're looking at the bottom there. They describe that the sun took on a strange color like a reddish rainbows in the sky. This has happened multiple times throughout history, and a lot of times people who see these portals in the sky say that the sun seems to change color and that there's these rainbows, sometimes strange colored clouds. So could that be all wrapped up in one phenomenon?
Oh, I think so. And I think if you were to expand that just a tiny bit to reported religious events where there are apparitions or visitations by different religious belief systems, a similar thing happens when they are visible, when they're showing themselves to large groups of people. There are astronomical changes that people that are witnessing that is happening in the sky. It doesn't surprise me that you're changing the physics of what is optically being seen, because you're probably warping or changing what the physical alignment is happening to all those gases, all those parts of that. You're probably changing that. I don't think you're doing anything to the sun. I think what you're doing is you're changing what the atmosphere looks like. Like you put sunglasses on of a certain shade, and that makes you see things in a different color.
Bob, when you showed that picture of the all the cylinders and that one black object, I remember seeing something like that. And this is what I found. This is a drone that Lockheed Martin actually built. It's an F-17 Nighthawk.
Right. That's not a drone. That's a manned aircraft.
That is a manned aircraft?
That is a manned aircraft. That is the aircraft that ended the Cold War, because when it flew into Baghdad, it was not seen. That is an F-117, which has been rumored to be retired for over 15 years and is still flying in exercises and still being tested.
Now, this is supposedly a stealth drone.
That is correct.
The UK has.
And we have something very similar to it. And can you go back to that picture real quick?
Yeah, sure.
See on the bottom there, the airfoil that's extended?
Yeah.
If you go back to Bob's drawings, you will see almost exactly the same lines showing up in position on there. No, there you go back one more. Right there, upper right-hand corner.
Yep.
The one in the upper left too. The front of it, it almost seems like it's got an air intake on it.
So we want to make sure we get through. We got a half hour left, and we got 4 or 5 different shapes we have to get through here.
Okay,
so
let's go to chevrons.
Okay.
Let's pop them up. Now, the interesting thing about the chevrons is that we have had people drawing these things for decades. All right, this is not a new phenomenon. I mean, we can go back to like the Phoenix Lights.
Right.
What happens is these are quite different objects than your traditional, triangle, which is, a black triangle with white lights at each point and a red light in the middle. These seem to be V-shaped objects with nothing, in the interior behind what's basically a giant wing. They all have very large lights on the bottom. They have different amounts. In some cases, it seems that there's more lights on one wing than on the other. That may be because of the angle people are seeing them at. But the one right above the word chevron was involved in an abduction of a mother and her child. The most intriguing thing about chevrons is that in a lot of the cases, including one of the producers at KGRA who saw one, they're absolutely silent. They seem almost like they're floating, and amazingly enough, a number of the reports state that they seem to be semi-transparent, and that's something I can't explain, which makes me think that chevrons are some sort of anomalous phenomenon.
Yeah, I don't think they're
military. Analysis on how these were sighted. And I had to say that the person that was talking about it, pretty well informed, and they just took the schedule of how they were showing up, and of course the great activity that happened in New York around this particular type of sighting, and it did sound like a flight test program. How they showed up and how they weren't seen, and then it would repeat back. So you had like a Monday through Thursday kind of activity. And then they didn't show up as much over the weekend, and it would come back up again on this same schedule.
How could you make them like semi-transparent? What type of technology would that be?
Well, going back to World War I, believe it or not, they attempted to make stealth airplanes way back in World War I. Obviously, no radar concerns. They made the aircraft completely see-through material as much as possible, so that it did not have paint on the outside of it, and they doped it so it was clear, And they put lights on the aircraft in World War II to try to match the background light so that it would be hard to visually see, obviously before radar came up and early in World War II. Interesting accounts of ghost skeleton aircraft from World War I flying around. So what would you do with that? You may be changing the skin. There may be sensors, and there's rumors that the F-35 has the ability to, in some versions of it, to put cameras and projection on the outer skin. Obviously, you can imagine the expense, but it would allow you to have what is being seen above the aircraft projected or shown on the bottom of the aircraft. And
I read about that.
Shown to the top, so you can't see it from down. That's out right now as a very current theory that capability exists.
Now, when they were talking about the Jeremy Corbell jellyfish, okay, apparently the United States is also working on some sort of squid-based camouflage that could possibly change the color of the skin of the aircraft.
Right.
Okay. So we do possibly have the technology
that they often refer to in the public as chameleon.
Mm-hmm.
It's been talked about for close to 30 years, trying to do this as much as possible. Again, the problem is the expense of doing this. For how pervasive of a capability is it? How useful would it be to have that capability? And it may have applications that make it very effective. I just think that a high-speed aircraft being able to do that, not so important. An aircraft like this, or air vehicle like this, or a vehicle like this, very, very interesting that you would do this, because it's nearly silent from most of the reports I've read on this particular one. It is not moving very fast. When it's seen, don't know what happens afterwards. Intriguing capability there. But there are some reasons for it, no doubt about it.
Okay, so
something like this, Commander.
Yeah.
That's been talked about quite a bit.
Right. I've heard about that.
A thing where they're talking about that they actually can make a skin that is almost transparent using cameras and stuff.
With cameras and right. Pretty amazing what we'll see in the future. So as far as these shapes, if you look at these things, these chevrons, it doesn't look like there's a lot of room inside. Whatever the technology is, maybe it's just drone, technology anyway. But still, it's when you say someone was abducted and went inside of one, or claim they were, that these things, maybe they're very, very large and they have plenty of room inside. But when you look at them, you think, wow, there's no room inside of those things.
It doesn't seem logical. You know what I mean? If it was a manned spacecraft, all right. Okay, you want to go to the next one? We're running out of time.
Sure, cigars.
Let's look at, I call these blunt end cigars. There's different types of cigars. Recently, and this also can be explained, people have been seeing dozens of portholes on these very long cylinders. And what they're actually seeing is pareidolia. They're actually seeing Starlink trains. And they're imagining that the Starlink trains are actually one long dark craft, and that the Starlink train of satellites is actually the portholes. So we've identified dozens of cases like that, and people send us photographs and videos all the time of Starlink. What you're looking at here are the unusual ones, because in several of these, especially along the bottom, you have what appeared to be like patterns or camouflage on these objects, and all of them are not very big. In the middle on the left, the orange, the purple, and below it the red, they seem to be similar objects. The purple one was actually shooting beams down to the ground and is almost an identical case to a coyote in Delaware that was sucked up into a cylinder in exactly the same way. The girl witness saw the cylinder drop a piece of meat out the bottom. A coyote came over to it at the edge of a forest. The coyote got sucked up. This is creepy. And then she heard what sounded like bones crunching, and then the carcass of the coyote was thrown to the ground, and the thing shoots off. She goes up to it, sees that there's no bones, no blood. It's just basically the skin. And she goes in the house to get a camera, comes back out, and it's gone. She goes back in the house. The mother says, "Where have you been?" She goes, "I went out to try to take a picture of something." And the mother says, "You've been gone 4 hours." All right. So I believe that there's some definite missing time, and that's one very lucky girl. Okay. Sure. The top row, the first 3 objects, they seem to be the same exact shape. The green one on the right and the one in the corner in the right, they seem to be similar type of objects. The one up in the upper right, that's a very, very large one where they believe that there were portholes and creatures were looking out the windows of it. So that one's different than all of the rest. The interesting thing is that we've been seeing cylinders since the 1890s, especially the airship wave of 1896, 1897, right on through up until today. So the question is, are some of these possibly some sort of dirigibles, or are they some sort of, anomalous craft?
Yeah, I got to tell you, I've been in Russia a number of times, and my friend's father told a story. Now, he's not even, he was telling it in Russian, it was being translated, but he was going through this pass, and this cigar-shaped vehicle came through really low, and all the cars stalled. Everyone got out of their car, lifted the hood when it was going on. Well, I think that happened first, and then the thing came through, and they said they had portholes in it, and then it floated off, and then once it got to a distance, someone jumped in the car and it started, and they all just took off, didn't even talk about it.
I mean, the aircraft carriers have seen these large cylinder shapes alongside them. I think as far back as World War II. I forget which aircraft carrier it was. But I wonder if some of these are dirigibles. I wonder if some of them are what they call sun balloons, where they heat up in the sun and then begin
solar
to
balloons,
float. And that people, are experiencing pareidolia. They're seeing something that's not really there, but making it appear that it's something anomalous in their mind. But this has been going on for 100 years. So, is there something else to it? All right. Let's do discs. Now, anybody familiar with Betty and Barney Hill?
Never heard of
them. This is exactly what they drew, basically, where there was this object with large windows and these creatures were looking out the window at them. We have dozens of these videos. The one specifically that's my favorite is the one on the right in the middle with the looks like military crew people. This took place in 1952, and a girl was looking out her window at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, and she saw this craft 30 feet away from her with large windows and what looked like military men with epaulets on their shoulders, on their uniforms, and they were busy doing something as if they were trying to fix something. This was right out her window, hovering in 1952, and one of it looks like a service member looks up and smiled at her, and then gradually it lifted off and shot away. There were 3 other reports. This was in New Jersey. There was one from Pittsburgh, Kansas, and off the top of my head, I can't think of where the third one was, but these people all drew the same thing. So again, are we looking at some sort of military craft? But in the Betty and Barney Hill case, the creatures that they saw looking out the window not seem to be human. So again, are we dealing with something that's both extraterrestrial and terrestrial and just looks similar? There's even one case, and I don't have the drawing here, where the person was inside the craft. Apparently one of the crew members, which was an alien, this is all 1952, was injured, and they were brought on board, and because it was requested that they give the people on this craft, whatever it was, water. And so they saw the inside of the craft, and oddly enough, they said that the mechanisms for piloting the craft almost seemed like the levers for a tower operator on a railroad to pull to change the tracks to another track, which would seem to be an unusual 19th century technology for a craft that looks like the Jupiter 2 out of the Lost in Space TV show.
Wow.
So that's
Time travelers. That's what
Yep.
it is. Yeah.
I am a time traveler guy. I believe we're dealing with time travelers from our own planet. That's just my opinion. All right, the last one I have are keyhole shaped objects.
Oh yeah.
The one in the middle at the bottom is from 1966 in Alabama from an APRO bulletin. All right, but as you can see, people are drawing. I call them keyholes because I don't know how else to describe them, and there's no way I can figure out what these things are, but they're very, very large objects, and in certain cases they've been seen over Canada several times, up in the far north of Ontario and Manitoba. So my question is there some sort of secret base in the northern forests, the remote forests of Canada, where you could successfully hide these massive keyhole-shaped objects? I believe these are anomalous.
When you're saying anomalous, what do you mean by that? Just unexplainable?
Unexplainable, yes. I will never say it's time travelers, interdimensionals, aliens. Yeah. I'll just say they're a shape that can't be described. They've been seen for over half a century. They're massive, and they seem to like to hide in the wilderness of northern Canada.
Well, I had two musical references. I immediately thought of Yellow Submarine when I saw the first one that you draw my attention to in the center of your diagram. And I don't know how many people remember the rock group Boston, but their spaceship was basically a guitar. And on the second famous album, it looks a lot like your upper left-hand corner. So not to take away from any of the serious nature of this, these are fascinating. I've seen these reports. I've heard this show up a number of times, and no one ever really follows up very much on it because I think it's just too weird or too hard to explain. Interesting.
Now, wasn't there a case where one looked like something like this, and it was a woman, and she got out of her car, and she looked up, and it looked like a muffler shop inside or something? There were all these things hanging. Are you familiar with that one?
Yep.
Yeah.
I remember hearing that report, and that goes back to a very interesting report. Bob has talked about it a couple of times, the interesting airship all along basically Texas up through Oklahoma and Ohio territories, the airships that were seen. And I read an extensive study on it that was done where the author tries to explain the possibility that there were people flying airships. And often this comes up that people would walk up underneath it and they could look up inside, as you just said, Martin, and see the inner workings or the inner structure of it, and then working on things trying to repair it and do things like that. Interesting that if you have that capability that you would expose that, but I think it's also very plausible you may open up, have the ability to open up and show the inside of the vehicle, and then be able to close it for flight.
Now, what is being reported? The majority of things being reported, as far as I'm not talking about lights in the sky or orbs, but when people are talking about physical craft that they observe today, what is the most common one that you hear about?
Okay, after you would have your plasma balls and stuff like that, spheres, metallic spheres would probably be number 2. Daytime, and these are daytime objects. Triangles, and then chevrons right now, and then discs. Discs have tapered off greatly over the past several decades. So
I have 2 quick questions for Bob. Martin, if you can squeeze it in.
Sure, you bet. Yeah.
First one, Bob, how come with the proliferation of us carrying cell phones have we not seen better recorded evidence?
Neil deGrasse Tyson. says that all the time. Yeah.
This is my answer to that, because I've thought about that a lot. In the 1950s and 60s, these if they are, say, aliens or interdimensionals or time travelers, they're landing with impunity. Okay, and people don't have cell phone cameras. If I was an alien, all right, I'd be well aware today that people have, better and better cell phone cameras, and that they have to change their modus operandi so that they're not seen the same way they were seen 40 or 50 years ago, because everyone's got a camera right now.
Okay, here's the next part. You talked about the incredible depth of the files that you have. Is MUFON going to start getting into the AI kind of machine learning to start analyzing the files against new things that are coming in? I mean, that seems to be the craze in almost everything else. You have a large mass of information. It seems like it'd be a perfect captive case for using a machine learning kind of capability to analyze a recent case and then be able to spit out all the possibilities based on the file data.
Well, compared to Enigma Labs that has multi-million-dollar infusions and Arrow and a DoD and NASA, MUFON is basically a small grassroots operation, and your basic AI package today that's not really that good off the shelf is probably $50,000. Otherwise, you'd have to have a benefactor for us to do research at the same level as, say, Enigma Labs. And I many times have mentioned to some of my superiors that we should be reaching out to Elon Musk, all right?
Absolutely.
And if Elon gives us access to a super duper sophisticated AI, we can give him a free 1-year membership to MUFON.
He's been waiting for that.
I will split the deal. Whatever you guys offer, I will double. Okay, right there. So, Elon, if you're listening, Mr. Musk, 2 years riding on you, and we'll feature the Mazda with the astronaut that's in orbit. That'll be
no, that's a Tesla. Tesla, you mean Tesla?
Yeah, Tesla. Excuse me. Did I say Mazda? Listen to me.
You said Mazda. Whoa, that we just lost him right there. But so yeah, we're getting right near the end here, and so Bob, again, you're going to be out here doing this talk at the MUFON Symposium. The name of that this year is the Battle for UFO Transparency. I'm glad they didn't say UAP, and that'll be great. Where can someone find you, Bob?
My email is DOII@MUFON.com. D as in director, O as in of, II as in international investigations. If you do a search for me on Google Bob Spearing UFO, you'll find me all over the place. All right. But if you want to contact me directly, DOII@MUFON.com. Yeah.
Well, I really have felt this all along. You do great research, and this whole field is better because of the work you do. And
thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's been great. We don't want to forget our good friend Paul Eno, who passed away just a number of weeks ago, and we're going to miss him in this field and all the things that he did for all of us. And he had such a great attitude and was such a nice man. He actually came to one of my auctions one time, and looked at all the stuff I was selling. That was kind of fun. But yeah, we're definitely going to miss him. And Don will be back next week. Commander will be gone. We're going to try to figure out what to do without him.
I'll be out for the next couple of weeks. I will probably be causing some UFO activities if all goes well with the project I'll be working on, flying around. But if you listen, you'll know it's me because you'll hear the propellers making noise. But I always get a kick out of causing trouble at night, especially in the wee hours of the morning.
Oh, good to know. Good to know. And yes, I just want to mention for my own show, I have Jonathan Wygant, the Marine, coming up with Mike Herrera, and that's coming up on May 7th. And that should be
it'll be a phenomenal show.
Humdinger. Yeah. All right. I think that's it for us tonight, gentlemen.
Thanks
Thank
so
you
much,
so
Bob.
much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, guys.
All right. We'll be back next week, everyone. Good night now.